So recently I did a review on the original CREEPSHOW and I thought it's only natural to follow it up with CREEPSHOW 2. And usually when I do these reviews, I like to open up with a question, something to answer in the course of the video. And my question for this one was going to be, is this a worthy sequel? Is this a sequel that stands up to the original at all? But honestly, these days, I feel like the answer to that question is a foregone conclusion. I feel like CREEPSHOW 2 has a massive fan base right now. People seem to love CREEPSHOW 2, and I fairly regularly hear that it's actually better than the original. And I don't just mean like random comments on the internet. Like one of my best friends thinks this is better than the original. And I'll go ahead and give my answer to that question right now. No, I do not think it's better than the original, but I'm gonna stick with my original question, even though I definitely do not like this as much as CREEPSHOW. Is it a worthy sequel? Does it stand alongside the original in a respectable manner? Let's have a respectable review of CREEPSHOW 2. What's going on, my friends? Welcome again to the Cobweb channel. My name is Daniel. So CREEPSHOW 2 came out in 1987 and was produced by New World Pictures. And while CREEPSHOW was directed by George Romero, written by Stephen King, this sequel is actually written by George Romero, directed by Stephen King. No, not directed by Stephen King, but based on stories by Stephen King. The film was actually directed by Michael Gornick, who hasn't done a lot of other directorial work either before this or since, but he's a pretty accomplished cinematographer who worked with George Romero a lot. He worked on Dawn of the Dead, Martin, and yes, the original CREEPSHOW, to name a few. Like with all anthologies, we open up with a wraparound, and I really like this opening shot of just a very gloomy, just after a rain, small town, just the kind of spooky small town vibes that I just love to feel. And we follow a kid who's apparently picking up a brand new comic book from the truck that's right now dropping them off. And it turns out this truck is run by the Creep, our spooky horror host that's going to guide us through these stories. And while the Creep was this ghostly skeleton in the original film that was actually a puppet, a fantastic looking puppet that I love, this is an actor in makeup, and not just any actor. This is Tom Savini, legendary effects artist Tom Savini. So really cool to see him acting in this film. Not the first time he'd acted in a, sort of George Romero film. He was also in Night Riders as well, and Dawn of the Dead, of course. And I gotta say, I really like this makeup. It's cheesy, it's goofy, but it's just got such a classic goblin kind of a look. And I better not get too attached to this makeup because it's gone after like 30 seconds, because now the wraparound turns into a cartoon. And that could be cool. It's clearly trying to draw us into a comic book reality for this, because after all, the original CREEPSHOW, and therefore this film as well, it's a big homage to EC Comics, classic horror comic books like Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror. They're trying to go very literal with that, with a cartoon wraparound. The only problem is the animation looks awful. Look, this is subjective, obviously. Some people might love it, but I think this is just cheap, garbage, Saturday morning cartoon kind of animation. Has no place in an theatrical movie. But let's not get too wrapped up in that, because we're pretty quickly jumping into the first story of this anthology, called Old Chief Woodenhead.
If you only make it to one scary film all year, make it one you remember all year long. CREEPSHOW 2.
So this one stars George Kennedy. And by the way, a lot of people think George Kennedy is in the first CREEPSHOW because he looks a lot like the guy who plays the father in Father's Day. I even got comments on my channel about how people thought that was George Kennedy. But no, this is his first appearance in a CREEPSHOW movie, and he plays a general store owner in a broken down, has-been ghost town out in the West. His wife comes out to tell him about what a failure he is and how he should just quit. She's actually played by Dorothy Lamour, who was a classic Hollywood actress who did a lot of stuff with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, like a lot of the road movies like Road to Rio. Yeah, that's right. I buy classic Hollywood musicals as well. In addition to horror movies, you should too. But as she's talking to him, this segment is really trying to drive home what a great, wonderful, perfect angel baby wrapped in cotton candy.
I feel like an angel baby swaddled in a cocoon of cloud candy.
George Kennedy is. He's just so charitable, giving. Anybody who comes into this store, whether they've got money or not, he gives them stuff for free. And his wife's kind of berating him about, well, I don't want to say berating. She's not mean. And frankly, she's being kind of realistic, that he needs to stop being so charitable. People are just feeding off of him, and he just needs to retire. He needs to to quit. He needs to go enjoy his life a little bit. And you know what, Dorothy Lamour? I can get behind that. You're right. The guy should take a little bit of retirement. But my main problem with this part is the script is laying it on so thick, and the music is so just schmaltzy sentimental. It makes this sound like a bad Hallmark TV movie. Like, it's just rough.
They'll take your charity until it dries up, and then they'll leave you. You and that wooden Indian of yours.
The music was done by Les Reed and Rick Wakeman, and honestly, I'm not totally bashing them because there are parts in this movie where the music is phenomenal, like so good. This is not one of those parts. They're really good at the horror of it all. They're not so good at the sentimental part. Now, one thing we come to learn is there's a very prominent population of a Native American tribe in the area, and an elder of the local tribe named Benjamin comes in to the store and basically kind of apologizes for how a lot of his people have been living off of his charity because times have been really hard, a lot of economic hardships in the area. George Kennedy talks about that a lot, and gives George Kennedy a collection of treasures, sacred family heirlooms from their people, and says, hey, we're going to pay you back in 2 years. Just hold on to these for now. George Kennedy, being an angel baby wrapped in cotton candy, is like, no, I could never do this. I'm just the nicest guy in the world. But Benjamin insists, and he keeps the stuff. As Benjamin's leaving the store, he takes a look at the wooden statue of a Native American man that stands on the porch of this store called Old Chief Woodenhead, and thinks he might have seen him move a little bit. Could that be foreshadowing for the horrors to come? Yes. Our main couple walks back into the store, and here the tone of this segment drastically changes when it turns out they are being robbed. There's 3 guys in there holding them up at gunpoint. A couple of goofy white guys and a tall, handsome, long flowing hair Fabio of a Native American guy. They're all holding him up. They're stealing his stuff. They're looking for money. And George Kennedy is shocked by all this and actually recognizes the beautiful hair guy right away as Benjamin's nephew. So clearly none of these guys tried to obscure their identities at all. George Kennedy knows exactly who they are. So I don't really know what their plan is here, but they're stealing stuff, and flowing hair guy Sam, yes, his name is Sam, it becomes clear that his goal is he wants to be a movie star. Kind of a random thing thrown in here.
They gotta make me a movie star.
You're a movie star.
He's really obsessed with his looks and how handsome he is, and he's really obsessed by his own long flowing hair and cannot shut up about it. So his goal is to steal money and then head over to Hollywood and become a big star. I'm sure this is going to work out very well for him. This is kind of a Star is Born kind of a segment, you know? One of the guys really wants to get out of there fast, but Sam just seems to be enjoying this way too much, and in a moment of goofing around, he accidentally shoots Dorothy Lamour, George Kennedy's wife, and she dies. He then knows he has to cover this up, so he kills George Kennedy, and they decide they have a change of plans. They have to leave tonight. So he says, hey, go home, get your stuff, we're gonna head out. And this is really when I'm questioning, how are you planning on getting away with this robbery if everything went as you planned? If you didn't kill these people, which was clearly an accident, and you didn't try to hide your identities at all. George Kennedy knows your family, he knows who you are. If you weren't heading out right away, what are you doing? What are you doing here? This plan makes no sense. As things are getting more intense, the music is getting a lot better. I really like the music pumping through this segment at this point. And it's time for some revenge, right? Because anthology segments, especially when it comes to stuff from EC Comics or based on EC Comics, it's gotta be a comeuppance, right? And here, Old Chief Woodenhead fully comes to life. And I gotta say, I love this effect. He looks amazing. We now, of course, have to get a montage of Old Chief Woodenhead killing off these bad guys. The first one, we don't even see him do it, but we just see arrows shooting through this guy, killing him. It's a great effect. There's really good gore in this movie. The next guy, he axes to death, and we get a good shadow shot of it happening. Then when he goes to kill Sam, of course, that's gotta be a good one, and it's definitely a good kill. I really like how he yanks Sam through a window, and the camera pans above it. It's like a John Wick 4 kind of a shot. And the segment's just been building up his hair, right? His hair is so important. So of course, he's got to get scalped. It's a thing that's very commonly associated with Native Americans back in Old West times, even though the white people, the settlers, also scalped people as well. So it's just kind of a thing in pop culture at this point. And watching this segment, I really come to realize this movie is going to be gorier than the original Creepshow, isn't it? Because honestly, the original Creepshow, it's got its gore moments, but it's not a terribly violent movie, and even though it's rated R, it's not that much of an adult movie. And Creepshow 2 is gonna prove it's the more violent, it's the more adult movie of the two. Do I love Old Chief Woodenhead as a segment? Not really. I mean, I think it does have some pretty clear problems, like especially at the beginning, but for the most part, I'm struggling to really explain why this segment is bad. I don't think I can. It just doesn't do much for me. I think the effect is cool, some of the violence is cool, but it just kind of leaves me going, yeah, you come to Cobwebs for hard-hitting commentary like this. Hit subscribe. We then go back to the wraparound, and it turns out the wraparound's gonna have its own story that doesn't really have anything to do with anything else. And it turns out it's about this kid getting bullied and ordering a Venus flytrap from a magazine. Yeah, it just seems very random, and the animation is still absolutely grating on my eyeballs. My God, can we please just get back to live action? We then jump into the second segment, which is called The Raft. And this is about a typical group of partying college kids who are going out to have fun out on the water. Actually, they're kind of a typical horror group of friends in that they don't really seem like friends. You've got the like cool, popular, hot couple of the football looking guy, cheerleader looking girl who are dating. But then there's also this nerdy guy with them and this super awkward, quiet, nervous girl. And I don't understand how all of these people are friends, but whatever, they seem to be. And it seems like nerdy guy and awkward girl are getting thrown together for a setup. So, you know, that's kind of a typical thing for a slasher movie. And this kind of feels like an opening of a slasher film, but this segment has definitely got some tricks up its sleeve. It turns out the point of their trip is they're going out to swim out to a raft that's sitting in the middle of a lake. And I don't see what's so great about this raft. Like, it's literally just a piece of wood, and they're just gonna swim out and sit on it, I guess. And they establish that it's cold, and they jump in the water and they're freezing. So I don't know. This doesn't look like a ton of fun for me, but what do I know? I'm just a nerdy guy who likes movies.
Whoa! I think it's cold now, man. Wait till you get out.
Once they make it to the raft, nerdy guy, Randy, his name is Randy, sees some kind of black ooze just in a compact circle floating along the water. And he's pretty clear right away that this is not natural. This is something bad. We need to get out of the water. So he frantically gets them all onto the raft. And the jock guy is like, it's just an oil slick. It's no big deal. Also, he says he doesn't believe in oil slicks.
Besides, Pancho, I don't believe in oil slicks, man. I only believe in what I can smell and taste and touch.
But it turns out he's wrong. This is something to worry about because it somehow grabs hold of Rachel, pulls her in, and she has this horrific death. This ooze just swallows her, covers her whole body, burns her, and drags her down to her death. And it's brutal. This segment is continuing to prove Creepshow 2 is the much more violent movie than Creepshow. I mean, it's very much the Halloween 2 to Halloween 1, right? I mean, that's the whole point of sequels, is they're supposed to get gorier, bigger than the first one. This movie's definitely not bigger because there's a lot less segments and it's a lot shorter, but it's definitely gorier. Of course, this ooze has got to get them one by one, and Jock Guy is the next to go. It reaches through the boards of the raft and grabs his leg, and it is clear that as soon as it touches you, it's some kind of acid and it burns at his foot. There's even, you can see the ooze going like under his skin and then out again. Like, it's gross. It's rough. This thing is really, really scary. Pulls him to his death, and now it's just cheerleader girl and nerdy guy who are left on the raft all alone to try to survive. Now, it's right about here that this segment gets a little more strange and a lot more pervy. She ends up falling asleep. They both fall asleep, and then when he wakes up, he decides now is a great time to feel her up while she's sleeping, and like, it's really really bad. Like, it's really uncomfortable. And this is interesting because usually with anthology segments, because it's a short story, right? So they got to be economical. They usually set up right at the start whether this is our good guy or our main character is a bad guy who we want to see get their comeuppance, like the rich guy in the cockroach segment of Creepshow 1, right? But nerdy guy definitely seems like he's the nice guy, while the jock guy is the jerk. But it kind of subverts it. We think back, we didn't really see the jock guy do anything bad. He was just kind of loud and obnoxious. But our nice guy is doing a full-on assault. And I almost wonder, is this segment a little bit ahead of its time in terms of having the commentary about how sometimes the nice guy is not the nice guy, whereas like usually in the 80s, the nerdy guy is always like the good guy and the jock is always the bad guy. And this subverts that. And I think that's kind of interesting. And it shows that while we thought we had a good guy to root for, we don't really, and they're probably all gonna die. Although Cheerleader Girl never does anything bad either. She doesn't deserve what's coming to her. But his actions directly lead to her death because he's not watching out for her. He's not looking to watch this thing. And she also dies brutally. He then tries to profit off of her death. That's his fault by using, while it's eating her, to swim away. But he is not successful. It ends up eating him too. And the final shot is listening to the music from this car, because by the way, they swam out to the raft without turning the car off, which is insane. Like, you think you'd come back and the battery's dead or you're out of gas or however you left it on. That's just crazy to me. But this segment is awesome. Like, it is fantastic. It's brutal. It is morally messed up. It is gory. The effects are incredible. I love the raft. It is such a standout anthology segment. I don't care what movie you're putting it in. It's going to be a standout. We then go into the final segment, which is called The Hitchhiker. And this opens up with a couple in bed, their alarm going off, and we then figure out this is not a couple. She's actually cheating on her husband with this guy. And this guy isn't like Ted Danson, some nice guy who she's leaving her terrible husband for, like in the original Creepshow. He's actually a male prostitute, and she has no intentions of ever leaving her husband. She just wants to go out and have some fun.
There's this wonderful guy. He charges $150, but that's for 6, count 'em, 6 orgasms.
But she overslept, and she now has to get home really quickly to get there before her husband does, so she doesn't have to answer any questions that she doesn't want to answer. Now, at this point, she actually gets home in time before her husband, and they live happily ever after. No, of course, things go very wrong. She actually accidentally hits a guy, kills him, and just decides to drive away. And this is a classic idea for a horror short story and anthology segment because it's a moral question that we could all ask ourselves and really think about. Like, if nobody saw you do it, would you report it, turn yourself in, absolutely go to jail for manslaughter for however long? Or do you just drive away? Do you pull, and I know what you did last summer?
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
And try to take that secret to your grave. That is what she's faced with, and she decides to drive away. She's actually talking to herself all the time that she's in the car. And, you know, you might find that kind of unrealistic, but I kind of prefer it to hearing a voiceover going over in her head. She's played by Lois Chiles, who, by the way, was in the James Bond movie Moonraker back in the 70s. And I think she's really good. She's really good at being somebody we know we want to die, but being interesting enough and even just a little bit likable enough to be happy to follow this segment through, even when she does something horrible. On his way home from work, her husband actually finds the dead body and pulls over to try to help. And who else pulls over is a truck driver who's played by Stephen King.
What do you think's happened? The guy got creamed. That's what happened. Happens all the time.
And I gotta say, if you watch my review of the original Creepshow, I had my criticisms of Stephen King as Jordy Verrill in that. I thought it was a little too big, a little too goofy. He is goofy and funny in Creepshow too, but I prefer this Stephen King performance. I actually think he's fun and actually funny. But of course, she ends up being haunted by this hitchhiker. She sees him by the side of the road. She pulls over, and there he is banging on her window saying,
How you doing, lady? Thanks. Thanks for the ride.
Now you might be asking, okay, what is he? Is he a ghost? Is he a zombie? My take is he's definitely a ghost. He's definitely a ghost that's taking a much more physical form and ends up getting more and more beaten and torn and just mutilated all throughout this segment as she is trying to evade him, and he's getting like flung all over the road at different points, and it's very fun watching his gore just increase. But a zombie couldn't get to the places that he gets to in this segment. He's definitely a full-on ghostly presence, but I love him. This segment is a lot of fun. Like I said, the effects are a huge plus to this thing because just watching the gore increase and like by the end, I mean, it looks like something out of like a Terrifier movie, right? He's just like this talky, pulpy, red, goopy, did I say gloopy? Just blob of gore, and it's super fun. I just love it. Something that I do like about her monologuing, as different things are happening throughout the segment, she's always thinking, how do I explain this? And I actually think about that in horror movies a lot. After the crazy horror situation is over, we got to the end of the movie, sometimes I do wonder, how is that person going to explain all this to the police afterwards? You know, it's kind of like in A Nightmare on Elm Street when the police go investigate Johnny Depp's death and it's just like blood and flesh everywhere and like no one knows how to explain it. She also keeps calculating how much the cost for the repairs to her car are going to be with each subsequential crash into this hitchhiker. And I'm just like, girl, don't you have insurance? Once we get to the end of the segment, and of course this woman has to get her comeuppance at the hands of the hitchhiker ghost. By the way, that's a really cool name, the hitchhiker ghost. I should start a local legend about that. Anyway, the image of the hitchhiker's gore is really cool, but the final image of our deceased main character, it could hit harder. It's just okay. We then go back to the wraparound and this whole weird, random, unnecessary story about this kid getting revenge against bullies and having these giant Venus flytraps eat them. And again, it's just a goofy cartoon. So if there was an actual practical effect of Venus flytrap monsters, that would make it worth it, but it's not cool at all. But at the very end, we do get it turned back into live action and we get to see Tom Savini as the creep one more time, and that's nice. So let's go ahead and rate this. Now, Old Chief Woodenhead, I'm gonna give a 5. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a decent story. It's got decent performances, and I do really like the effect of Old Chief Woodenhead, and there's some good gore, but I don't know. The story of this segment is just not very interesting to me, and I just think they lay on the sentimentality and the schmaltz way too thick at the beginning that the movie ends up getting off on kind of a rough foot for me. So I just got to put it middle of the road. Not bad. I just don't particularly care for it. But the Raft, I'm going to give an 8. This is a great anthology segment. Not a fascinating story necessarily, but incredible special effects. Just a classic horror premise executed so well. And like I said, it's got some social commentary that's maybe a little bit ahead of its time. And then the Hitchhiker, I'm going to give a 7. Just a solid, good times anthology segment. Just classic moral question and some really good gore effects. Now the wraparound, I'm going to give a 2. The lowest score I've ever given a wraparound in all of my anthology reviews. I just hate this animation. I think it is hideous. Now keep in mind, I'm not a child of the 80s. I didn't grow up in the 80s. I didn't really grow up watching cartoons that looked like this. And I'm sure, you know, there's some rougher animation in some 80s cartoons. I was watching 90s and 2000s cartoons and also Looney Tunes from like, you know, the 1940s and 50s as well. But that stuff looked amazing. But it's getting as high as a score as it is for Tom Savini and for that creep effect. I do really like that. All in all, I think CREEPSHOW 2 is a good movie. And I think it does stand alongside the original CREEPSHOW quite well. I don't think it's a massive dip in quality, but it is a massive dip in my affection for it. I do just have a lot of affection and just sentimental feelings towards the original CREEPSHOW. It's a movie that's close to my heart and makes me happy even through its flaws. But CREEPSHOW 2, I just don't have that. I think it's good. The great stuff is great. The bad stuff is bad. And all in all, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. A solid horror anthology. So that's my thoughts, but I want to know yours. Let me know down in the comments below. What do you think of CREEPSHOW 2? And if you enjoyed this, definitely check out my review for the original CREEPSHOW. Or if you've already seen that, I've got a playlist of all of my horror anthology reviews. I love talking about anthologies. I plan to continue talking about more. So definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Don't forget to enjoy yourself today. Have some fun, and I'll see you next time.